Thank you, Rachel. That's really kind. I think my role in this short time that we have together this morning is to really just push back at something that Len said about this a way of thinking differently. And if I can achieve one thing this morning, that's really what I'm going to try and do. Is sort of tie up the way we think a little bit and see if I can progress that, see if I can actually challenge that in a bit of a proactive and bit of a fun way, right? One thing that stood out for me, not only when I walked in here, but the amount of time I've seen the word people, person. When Len was speaking there, the amount of time I referred to the way that we engage with people. It's an area I find really fascinating, is behavioral economics. When we look at, say, for example, behavioral psychology, right? It's something that, and again, I'm speaking to some of the leaders in Wales here, right? When it comes to working with people, right? Understanding when it's not just about intervention, but really where prevention sits. And before that, where does education sit? It's about making Wales a healthier society, right? And so when I saw this, caring for people and keeping people well, that really stood out to me, because what I'm going to do now is I'll hopefully show you how we've done it in a different industry. And I believe there's a number of synergies in there, right? Because I can speak about my career as a rugby player, right? I can tell you that actually there's a bit of a unique story of how I came to play. I mean, you can tell by my accent, it's not Welsh, right? Okay. But interestingly, not a lot of people know that by the age of 21, I had no GCSEs, no A-levels, and I was working on a paper mill up in the northern parts of South Africa. Right? I'd spent 6 years in the mining industry as well. Right? Loved it. Absolutely fine, fascinating. Mum worked there, dad worked there. And it's not the down the mine. It's not like it's just an open cast. I know it's mine. And so when I was about 17, 18, right, I'd get up in the morning, get on the back of a pickup. We'd go up into the mountains, sit on top of a ridge, and go climb up on pylons. And so, okay, how do we connect the cables? Absolutely loved it as a young kid. But the bit that really stood out for me, so again, I can talk about that, about how I ended up there, or how from the age of 21, no GCSEs, no A-levels, living out in the northern parts of South Africa, literally 3 years later, I qualified with an honors degree in business management in England. How? Or even better, 2 years after that, I ran out in front of 72,000 people in the Stade de France, in the Six Nations, running out in red, not in green. Right? And although there's a number of life principles that sit in that, the bit I actually want to talk to you about is what happened when that came to an end. Because it came to an end abruptly, and there's a real key life lesson that I took through that. Because what I found was, as I experienced this real setback, I mean, it was around about this time of year. I went and I'd just left the Cardiff Blues. I'd been captain there for a few years. And I wanted to best Toby Falatau, right? I mean, and that by itself is no mean task. And so I believed going to work with a previous coach of mine, Dean Ryan, who now coaches the Dragons, by the way. He was coaching Worcester. I wanted to go work with him to develop myself and develop my playing skills. And unfortunately, during the preseason, I pulled the calf muscle. Happens, right? A couple of days later, I pulled the other calf muscle. A couple of days after that, I pulled the stomach muscle. I then tore a bicep, and I then tore a pec muscle, all within the space of days. They took me out of the environment. They plopped me into sort of a bit of a quarantine, saying, look, we've got to figure out. And about 3 months after that, I still remember sitting in a neurologist's room. We said, look, we found something in your blood. I'm going to try and explain to you what Isaac's syndrome is, neuromyotonia. Right? And I remember him telling me, look, unfortunately, I have to break the news to you, you'll not play rugby again. And you've got to remember, this was my career, this was my living. My initial thought was, okay, how am I going to pay my mortgage? And then he said to me, look, he didn't want to scare me, he wanted to be very real with me, and I asked him to be. I said to him, look, can you give me examples of other people who may have this condition? So I got a bit of a reference point. And he said, look, I don't want to do that. I don't want to give you those sort of expectations. Some people really struggle with the condition to the point where physically they cannot be active at all. You've got to remember, so as a rugby player, I mean, I'm about 3 stones heavier there than I am now. Right? I kid you not, I used to take a packed lunch to bed. 3 eggs, a protein shake, every single night. I was that guy. And I had to work really, really hard at that. So I know from an identity point of view, I was facing a significant shift. Change was being forced on me. And you know what? I excelled through that change. I took that wave that fell on top of me, used the energy of that, and really helped to kick me onto it. Because you see, for me, rugby was what I did. It's not who I am. You know, I told you guys at the start of this, I find that human behavior, that personal side, fascinating. You see, and for me at that stage, as I knew I was going to face this transition, I spent 6 months in Hereford Hospital, trialing all sorts of medication, IVIG and all sorts. And through all of that, I just thought, look, what can I learn from this experience? How can I utilize this? And more important than all of those things, I kept asking myself a question. What's working? What's going right now? Because here's the thing, if you don't know why things work when they do, you don't know how to fix them when they don't. As I made that progression going from South Africa into here, there was a number of life lessons that I took with me. And I just stayed up focused on those. And that's kind of what I want to do with you guys, because the reality is, you guys are facing this change process, right? And there will be times when there's a lot of energy around it, and there'll be times where there's setbacks. And what do we do in those moments of setback? So those people who know me really well, right, know that when I left the hospital, I went and spent some time in New Zealand and Australia. And when I came back, Sam Warburton, Alan Jones, Ken Owens, Jake Ball, Hallam Amos, Tyler Morgan pulled me into a room and they said, Andries, we want you to take over the Players Association of Wales. I said, no way. I almost said, hell no. But I said, no way. I'd been there. I'd been captain, and I remember speaking to a couple of my teammates, right? And they were going through a difficult situation. So look, that's why we go to the Players Association. They are there to support us. Went to them for support, and there was no support available. Right? I said, I'm not taking over that. That's the stage we're in. And they convinced me. I said, look, I had to make the decision. Are we going to be present, or are we going to be engaged? And I wanted to be the type of person who's engaged, not just present. So I did it. So I took over the CEO role, and I'll show you some of this, the organizational psychology concept or theories that I applied. And I believe those are very transferable into some of the things that Len just mentioned here this morning. But hopefully this graph will just give you a little bit of an explanation. When I wrote my thesis, I recognized that behavioral economics tells us that performance, individual performance, is dictated by 3 parameters. Physically, having the ability to do the job, having the competency, so having the technical and tactical knowledge to do the job. And the third part of it is wanting to do the job or the task. So when you think about this from my perspective, when I got ill, my ability was significantly affected. I still knew how to do the job, and I still wanted to do the job. And I've done this with guys in the military as well. When we help rebuild them when they've suffered a severe injury, right? We start building their identity back from who they are towards what they can do. Right? And we applied this principle because reality, if you take this and you turn it into an org chart, something interesting starts happening. Right? This is the stuff that I did as business psychology, is I would take that graph and I'd turn it into an organizational chart. And I'd say, right, in every department, who do we have that develops the athlete? I mean, sports science over the last 20 years has gone through the roof. I mean, if you think about it in the sort of 80s, 90s, when the South Africans arrived here, it looked like they ate half the elephants in South Africa. Like they were like yay big, right? And Wales would try and compete with them based on talent and flair. Am I right? And we got some of the most skillful players in the world. And so sports science evolved, and what that did is it built everybody bigger, stronger, faster. Nutrition, injury rehab, and prevention. And then came data. Then came video analysis. Right now, and I'm working with a club in France, and we're going to start Francais, and I kid you not, every single training session, there are 2 drones flying over the session. The players are wearing GPS trackers and heart rate monitors all at the same time. We'll be pushing towards the next evolution of this, which will be volumetrics, where I can push a button right now and see your point of view from where you are sat right now, because there's a number of different cameras. So that's the next evolution of this. Right? That is how we develop the player. So when I started asking this, I remember when I was with Worcester, we had 5 physios, right, plus 2 interns. We had 5 conditioners, plus 2 interns. We had a full-time nutritionist. We had an osteopath. We had a team doctor. Right, so the athlete was being developed. I then started looking, who do we have? And back in the day, you'd have a forwards coach and a backs coach, right? Now you got a forwards coach, a backs coach, a director of rugby, a technical coach, a skills coach, a scrummage coach, a kicking coach. Right? And that's just for the senior players. That's not just that's let alone the academy guys. Right? So huge. And then I'd ask the question, who do we have that develops the person? In Wales, we had one person who looked after the needs of 300 players. And yet the interesting thing is, and our colleagues from New Zealand, they'll tell you that New Zealand have this mantra: better people make better players. Better people make better All Blacks. It's taught right from school level. And I really wanted to explore that better, not just in the sporting environment, but really in the environment of business. To say, if better people make better players, do better people make better managers, better accountants, better doctors? And if that's true, and what we were able to prove over a 3-year period, we tested in the NRL, 585 players, we monitored them for 3 years, and simply asked the question, right? Every weekend, 14 of them can be selected. We excluded the guys who are being rested, and we excluded the guys who are injured. So if we're talking about performance in your workplace tomorrow, all of you who are here ready to go perform tomorrow, we simply monitored how engaged are you with off-field performance. And so from that point of view, understanding your finances, communication skills, mental well-being, personal development. Right? We asked the question, okay, those who are engaged with that, how often do they get selected? And what we found over 3 years, players who were engaged with off-field activities, developing themselves as an individual, as a person, they got selected more often, they had a longer tenure at the club, and they had a longer tenure at the game. They also were nearly 87% more likely to become a vice captain or a captain. Better people make better everythings. Right? And that's the bit I think that there's a huge opportunity for you, because when we look at our organizations, especially 21st century organizations, right, when we experience a bit of a setback, we refer to what we are competent in, what we have the ability to do. But that's not where inspiration sits. That's not where the energy, the real stuff sits. And I can prove it to you. I'll show it to you in a minute. Right? Before I do, just because we got a bit of time and because I really enjoy this sort of stuff, right, about playing around with sort of people, right? When I was down in Hereford Hospital, right, the people who know me know I've got a little thing with me, right? It's a little compass. I've carried it around with me, and this is compass number 3 now, because the first 2 went through the wash, and at some point I'll put this one through the wash as well, right? A little brass compass, and I always carry it with me. Because for me, I always need to be knowing where's north. So I want to challenge you. If you put your finger up for a minute, right? On the count of 3, I want you to point to north. 3, 2, 1, go. Right. Okay. So just so you all know, actually it is there. Right? But the question that I have for you, isn't that what we do with our well-being sometimes? Right? With our relationships, with our finances, with our performance. It's like being healthier, being a better version of me. Okay, so it's not there. Okay, so now I've got to go reference point. Okay, so that's what I don't look like when I feel thriving or am I optimal. Right, so okay, so that's somewhere there. Remember what I said at the start. If you don't know why things work when they do, you won't know how to fix them when they don't. When these moments of change get thrust upon you, when these challenges appear, you need to be knowing where you are going. And if you have those reference points, at the end of the session, I'm actually going to get you guys to actually come up with a couple of reference points as part of this Amplify event. And I wanted to do that same thing when I agreed to take over the association. I brought all the staff together and I said, right, I need to know where's north. What are we aiming for? Where are we going? Because you see, we're not limited by what we know. We're limited by what we believe is achievable. Individually and collectively. That's the way human systems work. Right? But there's a challenge. There's a challenge in this, because we can walk out of here and go, right, high fives, we're going for this. Come on, everybody up, yeah, come on. And they walk back into the workplace. And there's that bureaucracy. There's the policies, the procedures, the way of doing things. And I mean, you've had the CEO stand here and say, be bold, go for it, change this. Right? So you have the permission to do it. The challenge is, through the 80s and 90s, research tell us that we look towards models that made us very efficient at what we do as organizations. Right? So this is chaos theory. Complex adaptive systems, chaos theory. And basically what it says is, if I give you autonomy, you will move up towards chaos. everybody could just go tomorrow and do whatever you'd like to do, it would be perceived as chaos. And so what we do as organizations through the 80s and the 90s, what we did was we brought in policies and procedures and departments that make us more efficient at what we do. There's a problem with that. You guys already know where I'm going with this, don't you? There's a problem with being sat right here. Chaos theory tells us this is where companies go to die, because they're not adaptable to change. When change comes, when those setbacks came, they can't adapt. It's doing the same things the same way regardless. And you guys know that's the definition of stupidity. Doing the same thing, expecting a different result. Right? What the research will tell us is actually this is where management sit. And you manage the employee. You manage the member of staff. You lead the person. Think back to that model. That's where inspiration, that's where creativity sits. Because on the edge of chaos sits innovation, sits problem solving. On the edge of chaos sits that boldness that Len was talking about. I mean, you know that there are some people in this room who head up departments, and their day-to-day sits pretty close to this, right? And you know they're some of the best problem solvers. All right? So what we need to start looking at as an organization, and this is what I applied with the Players Association. I pushed the decision-making down towards where the information is. Those same players who weren't engaged, I went straight back to them and said, look, what do you want? They said, we want this. And we were, I'd say we had a third of the budget of the next association that was above us, Ireland. We had the same amount of players, we had a third of their budget. They literally cannot touch us now. Why? Because we work with people. We allow them the autonomy to make the decisions. I mean, we've got guys now who decided, look, we want to do a chainsaw course. Chainsaw course, really? Fantastic, let's do it. Right? You can imagine what some of the clubs are like, right? Are saying, like, wait, hang on a minute now. You're going to give a bunch of rugby players chainsaws? Yes. Right? But there were skills. We're having conversations around that about developing life skills in those moments. It was actually interesting when we started doing the chainsaw course. It was from that one of the players mentioned something around him being a dad. He went, pediatric first aid. And all those players went, oh, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to know what to do if a child chokes or burns. We're all in that age of going to become fathers. And from that, then we started looking, well, what changes does that have on your lifestyle? I mean, oh, yeah, significant. So what about your well-being? How do we make sure that we become better at rest and recovery during those challenges? You see, those fundamental steps, but it came down to understanding where north is, understanding where the reference points are. The other thing I need to just highlight here, and Len mentioned it, here, where distrust sits. Because in reality, if I want to go be bold, I need to be trusted. Because if I make a mistake, that's when we learn, right? We learn from mistakes. We don't learn from doing the same thing over and over again. So we need to have the autonomy to go and make mistakes, to go and try things. But we'll never do it when we sit as an organization sat within this efficiency model. As staff, yes, there's an important part that sits here. But people, each of you as an individual, your teams, the cohesion that sits here, it doesn't sit here, it sits on the edge. It sits where creativity and energy sits. And the challenge for you is, you've already been told here today, you have the autonomy. Go. Live on the edge of chaos. Do something different. Inspire each other to think differently. When I look at this concept of thinking differently, right, I have a little trick, and just because we've still got a little bit of time, I'm going to do it anyway, right? Can I get everybody to just put their hands down in front of you like this? Okay? And what I want you to do is turn your thumbs downwards. Right? So what I'm going to ask is this table here in front of me, if you guys go with the people on my left, and then that table and this table, you guys all go to my right. Okay? So everybody to my right, you just keep your hands like that for me for a second. And everybody, this table included, everybody to my left, well, you take your right hand over your left hand, interlock your fingers except these two. Keep them straight. Okay? Now what I want you guys go left hand over right hand, interlock your fingers, all except these two. And remember what I said to you guys at the start? I want to tie up the old way of thinking. With a bit of fun, I want to show you a new way of thinking. Engage with that way of thinking and have a bit of energy and have a bit of fun about it. So on the count of 3, I want you to make a little water piss like this. 3, 2, 1, like that. Whatever the old way of thinking is, I want it to feel that way. A bit of fun, having a bit of laugh at ourselves, going, yeah, okay, we've been stuck in our ways. All right? But fine, we all agree we're going to do something a bit different now. That okay? To finish it off, when I look at this idea of a compass, like I run a company called One Step North now, right? And it's all about taking that one step, making sure we know where the reference points are, whether we're thriving and being in an optimal state, or whether we're facing a setback. We need to be knowing where we're going. We need to know where that reference point is. And if you're unsure, as you guys go through the next couple of days now, say, okay, look, fine, we're in. Now what? Here's a simple analogy that may help you. Look at a compass. Every single one of you have it on your phone, right? So when you wake up in the morning, when you walk into the office, before you check your emails, open up a compass and just ask yourself, where are we going? Where does north sit for me individually? Where does north sit for my team? And there's a simple way you can look at it from that point of view. And I'm going to ask you guys to actually have a quick conversation on the tables, right? When you see the E, think about being engaged. You all know somebody in your department or somebody in your life, they're present. They show up, they do what that needs to be done, and they leave. They're in that management zone, right? But are they engaged? I mean, if you were asked as your partner or in your relationship, I mean, I don't want to be present as a dad. I want to be engaged as a dad. That means coming down to my little 2-year-old's level, sitting on the floor and having conversations. I hate saying this, but yeah, getting dressed in a Disney princess dress. Why? Because I'm engaged with her. I want her to think differently. Make sure that you are the one. And by the way, if you can't think of somebody in your department who's just present, you may actually be that person. Right? Don't be that person. Right? Be engaged. If you're going to talk about Amplify, make sure you're engaged. So ask yourself when you sit there with that compass in the morning, say, look, am I engaged or am I present? The other way to look at it is your well-being. That's West. Right? If it's not in you, it cannot come out of you. I guarantee you this. I've seen this in so many industries across all levels of the business, whether it's the frontline workforce or whether we're talking about the senior managers. If you are not well, you cannot expect those around you to be well. We all work for somebody who goes that extra mile, and we all applaud them for it. In rugby, we do this all the time, right? The guy who's out there doing the extras, all the time you go, well done, until they burn out, until they injure themselves by going up, because then we call them naive for not considering their rest and their recovery. You guys are the leaders of this change program. If it's not in you, it cannot come out of you. And so the question I've got for each of you right now, you don't have to put your hand up, you don't have to say it, right? What are you celebrating right now? What win streak are you celebrating right now from your well-being? Is it, I've gone 8 days in a row by not looking at my phone past 8 p.m.? We know that has an impact on your sleep. We know sleep has an impact on our well-being. Is it the 11, 12 days that you've made sure that you've been purposeful about what you eat and not missing meals? A lot of people think about what we eat. Actually, it's a lot about the meals we miss, which then leads us to eating healthy after. Come on, you guys know this better than anybody else, right? The shift patterns that you guys have to work, the hours, the chaos you have to deal with, you guys know this. So let me ask you, what wins are you celebrating? And if you're not celebrating any wins right now, well, when you walk into the office tomorrow, the day after, maybe pull your phone out and say, look, what's the one thing? What's the one step I can take that's going to improve my well-being? Len mentioned this as well, right? When you come to South, we need to know what non-optimal looks like. And that means we need to be willing to have difficult conversations with ourselves and with people around us. Because we have to face the things that we don't fix. If you don't have a proactive approach about engaging with the difficult conversations, maybe not initially, eventually it will catch up with you. And I guarantee you, that's where tension becomes conflict. Deal with the tension. Have the courage to stand up to it and to say, stop. We're no longer going to do it this way. We're going to engage with it in a different way. Fix it before you have to face it. And then finally, what's the next step? When When you sat there and you look at that compass, ask yourself, what does the next step look like? Because here's the thing, and we do this in sport all the time. We constantly look for the 1%ers, right? And here's why. Because if I take 1% improvement every single day, that gives me 5% improvement over a week. It gives me 20% improvement over a month. Now, could you imagine if every single person in this room was able to improve, amplify this whole cohesion, this whole change strategy by 20% in the next month, and we aligned all of those? Think about what I said before. It's not about what we know. It's about what we believe is achievable. Once you align those 27, you really see what could actually be achievable. That's where impact lies. So for the last 5 minutes, I'll let you have 5 minutes before we finish, right? I wanted each table just to take the opportunity, right? And I just want you to have a look at one of these things. And as a group, just decide, right? Can we come up with one thing that's going to mean that from Monday or tomorrow or over the next few days, that's going to make sure that we as a group are engaged, not just present. You're not just here today. You actually are going to be engaged with Amplify. What does that look like, feel like? What's the low-hanging fruit? What can we go do? If you don't want to talk about that, have a look at the well-being. If it's not in you, it can't come out of you. Okay, so what are we going to set our goals, our strategy on to make sure we're celebrating a bit of wins? Think about the whole Amplify thing. You're now about 18 months down the road. Have you guys celebrated wins? Have you guys been real purposeful about it? Because what's rewarded is repeated. Think about it. So what wins are we celebrating? The well-being of this program, the well-being of this change initiative, or individual change, or group change. What are one of the 2 or 3 things we can do? And I want you to actually come up with it. And the other thing is, what do we need to face? What are the honest conversations we need to have? So I'll leave each group decide whether you want to look at a next step, a 1%er, something we can do today, tomorrow, or Monday, that's going to give us that 20% improvement over the next month. Or what can we do to make sure that everybody's engaged? Yes, we may walk out of here and we're all on board. How do we onboard everybody else? Because I don't want presenteeism in the workplace. Everybody focus on absenteeism. There's a lot of people who are present. We need to be there engaged if we're really going to create change. And then the final thing is, what do we need to stop doing? So I'm literally going to set a timer, and 5 minutes, I just want on each table to come up with one thing that stands out. And if I can ask if you guys are okay with it, then one person is just going to share that with the room. So we all make sure that we're all on board. And we can learn from each other as well. Is that okay? So I'll set the timer right now. 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 30-second warning. Okay, everybody, I know there's a fair few conversations happening right now. Can I ask you guys just to hold it there for us just for a second? Please hold that thought for us. It's, again, I want to make sure that, especially when we have a bit of a break, continue this conversation. But I don't want to miss the opportunity just before we go, right? Can I ask someone from each of the tables just to give us one thing that stands out for them? One thing that they as a team, or they as an individual perhaps, are recognizing from their engagement or from their well-being? Or what is a one step that they would like themselves to do, or that they'd like to encourage others to do as well? Or potentially a conversation that may need to be had. So could I ask that we start on the table at the back there?
I've been handed the microphone, so I'm going to use that privilege and share a thought. We were just talking about how fraught we can feel in our working week and the day. People feel they're exhausted and work long hours. And there's just something for me that was about the engaged and well-being around thinking how we can be more purposeful. So I sometimes find my days back-to-back in meetings, and I wonder whether I've really been engaged in all of those meetings rather than just present, and whether I actually need to be in all of those. So really choosing where we spend our time to be more purposeful is my thought.
Fantastic, thank you.
I don't know if I need a mic. We focus completely on well-being, and something that doesn't cost anything. Overwhelming research is gratitude. Thanking people doesn't cost anything. All big studies are showing us physical and psychological well-being.
And isn't it interesting that as you mentioned this, thanking people, it's far easier to thank a person than it is to thank a category, a patient, a passenger, whatever the category is, a staff member. Right? Thanking a person is far, far easier. And it comes back to something that Lynn said about as well, right? It's about that energy. You know, if I walked out of here today and I said to you, oh, look, I donated some money to charity, you'd go, hey, well done. But if I said I gave up my weekends to go and help a local charity, you'd say, oh, look, actually, that's a bit more inspiration. It's not about the money, it's about the time. It's about the energy, and gratitude really links into that. It's about giving somebody the energy, the time. You can write somebody an email, right? Or write them a note, a physical note. Same message, different sentiment. I guarantee you it's more impactful. So that gratitude from your own well-being and from their well-being. When I run the masterclasses around the neuropsychology, so the chemicals, serotonin, massive surges of serotonin because of that. So you're absolutely right. And serotonin helps us regulate our emotions and our moods. Comes back to what you were saying. So no, absolutely more that. The next table. Oh.
Go on here.
Yeah, go for it.
We were looking. Oh, sorry. Thank you. We were looking at well-being as well, and we were looking at physical activity. So using physical activity for mental and physical well-being. And we were talking about setting monthly challenges. So you've got something that you're aiming for, you're working for. So as a small group in the Breast Centre, we have a monthly physical activity challenge. It might be an outdoor walk, or we did the Pretty Mudder, things like that, to encourage people to get active and to use that for their mental well-being. And then when they complete it, the sense of, okay, so what's next?
Yeah.
What are we going on for next?
Where's north? Absolutely. Just on that one, there's a really interesting one, and I probably half of you, 3/4 of you would probably already know this, but endorphins, right? So when you do that physical activity, everybody knows what endorphins are, right? Do you know it's an abbreviation? Everyone know what morphine is? Yeah? Right? Endogenous or endogenous, internally created morphine, endorphins. Right? So when we look at the players, initially with that transition piece, don't stop exercising. Change the exercise, go do some breathing, go do some activities, any of the ones you want, you will get the endorphins, right? Internally created morphine. It helps you regulate pain, it helps you regulate the stress response. Absolutely right. Was that, yep.
Okay, so we talked about the next step. We talked about lots of things, but we talked about the next step and what does the 1% require of me. And I think that we have to be honest, and in being bold, we have to be honest about the things that haven't worked as well, so that we can learn from those things and move forward. And we also need to be honest about the people in our communities that can do things to make a difference to the person far more than we can as a health service.
Oh, superb. Absolutely
right. Table 2 hit a nerve, I think. We discussed emails. Part of the well-being topic, and giving time back to people is we're slave to emails, and culture of management can be in lots of places, and the NHS is managers emailing at 11 p.m. and it seemed to be a good thing, not a bad thing. So part of the well-being and part of what we've seen as well-being, and giving people more time back, use that time more efficiently as well. Go and see your people, have that difficult conversation, go and have those nice conversations, go and tell people well done, go out there, see your teams, which we all probably don't do half enough.
Absolutely right. I'm sure there's many people in this room that would echo that sentiment.
So we weren't able to actually focus on something specifically, but I think in terms of engagement,
differently. Yes.
In terms of engagement, I think it's about being responsible. I mean, we're all in this room for a reason, and we can all make a difference. So we know we've had the strategy since 2014, but I'm pretty sure across the health board that the messages that are in here haven't been communicated succinctly in the way that they need to. So I think that's something in terms of engagement. Take what we learn over the next couple of days and get that out there and be responsible and make a difference.
That's great next steps. Absolutely.
Yeah, we had similar themes to some of the others, but there was just to reflect a sort of principle discussion that we had in relation to engagement. Colleagues were talking about the building of teams being something that doesn't happen by accident and needs investment. but also that the first stage of that is listening, and that being an important theme.
Absolutely. I think we're down to the last couple of tables. I just know we're pushing a little bit on time, so won't get too much of it, but go on.
Well, echoing a lot of the themes already, we did focus on well-being and the importance of looking after ourselves. And if we don't look after ourselves, then how can we really be effective? Heard some good examples of other teams, around the table and what they've done within their teams. But just echoing the last comment really is we need to listen. We need to talk to our teams and ask them what do they need, what do they want, what would help them, and then use that to promote well-being within the team.
Awesome.
Hi, table 4. We talked about how we engage when we've got so many pressures of other bits of our jobs that daily take our time, and so we were talking about actually carving out some time that we deliberately say this is now to engage with Amplify in a mechanical way, and doing that, and then gradually being able to integrate that where we can talk about our day job and do our day job, but at the same time not let that drown out the thinking around Amplify. So it was that kind of immediate pressure that we were trying to establish something where we could carve something out before we could integrate it into all our thinking.
In high performance sport, we call that feed forward, where we have small team sessions to discuss an initiative, or to discuss a situation that we may be facing, rather than get the feedback afterwards and what we could have done. We still do that, but a lot of the times we're far more purposeful about it in carving out that bit of time to look, here is what we're going to do proactively, having the conversation before the fact. So absolutely great initiative. We've yielded huge results on that from a performance point of view on the field. When you look at the communicators, the Dan Biggers, the Reece Webbs, those key decision makers, a lot of that is based on feed forward. Those sessions come from that. A lot of creativity that comes in that. I think we're on the last table, am I right? Yep.
So similar themes actually to a number of people in terms of the room, but we talked about we need to stop valuing the wrong things and the wrong behaviour. And one of the examples was we sort of pat ourselves on the back when we work through lunch, or we do our emails at home, etc. So we need to stop doing that, and try and value the right things.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's a quote that comes to mind. I can't remember who said it, but it is based on the lines like, I used to be scared of failing at the things that are important to me. Now I'm scared of succeeding at the things that aren't important. I think about that for a moment. I used to be scared of failing at the things that are important to me. Now I'm scared of succeeding in the things that aren't important. Usually when you speak to people at the end of life and they reflect back on the things, usually it's that shift there, it's that moment of saying, look, what was really important? And so the point you're making there, absolutely key, is being able to have those difficult conversations with ourselves now. So look, could you guys just imagine for a second, if we took each of the comments that we've just heard in this room, right, aligned them, and we all actively engage with them. We took those things away from us and said, look, that's the 1%ers that lie there. Could you imagine the change? The emails, the difficult conversations, the well-being, celebrating each other's small wins in the other departments. Could you imagine the energy and the change that would really happen? Then we're taking the next step, not just talking about it. I'll be around for the rest of the day, and if anybody wants to have a chat, more than happy to. I'll probably finish it there rather than take some Q&As. But look, thank you so much for having me here today, and I look forward to speaking to you guys afterwards as well.